My daughter looked at me across the white linen tablecloth, her eyes cold and hard as diamonds, and sneered. Your life is nothing to be proud of. Dad, so do us both a favor and do not show up to the wedding. I just want the check and not the embarrassment of your presence. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the black Centurion card hidden in my old leather wallet. A card that could buy this entire restaurant without a credit check. I stood up quietly, canceled every pending payment in my head, and walked out, knowing that in 48 hours, she would learn exactly what my worthless life was actually worth. My name is Garrison Ford. I am 71 years old, and for the last 40 years, I have built half the bridges and tunnels in Seattle. My hands are stained with oil and concrete. My back is stiff from decades of sleeping in trucks, and my face is weathered by the Pacific Northwest rain. To look at me, you would see a retired blue-collar worker, maybe a man surviving on a union pension, driving a 10-year-old Ford pickup truck struggling to pay the heating bill. And you would be wrong. I sold Ford Infrastructure 5 years ago for $18 million. But I never changed my lifestyle. I never bought the yachts or the penthouses because I wanted my children to value the dollar, not the image. But sitting there in the Obsidian Room, the most pretentious restaurant in downtown Seattle, I realized I had failed completely. The room was dimly lit, designed to hide the small portions and justify the astronomical prices. The walls were covered in black velvet, and the only light came from crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my first house. I felt the familiar itch of discomfort, the feeling of being a bull in a china shop. My flannel shirt was tucked in, but I could feel the eyes of the waiter lingering on my frayed collar, judging the man who clearly did not belong. Across from me sat Brittany, my youngest daughter, 26 years old, and beautiful in a way that cost a lot of money. Her hair was perfectly highlighted, her skin glowed from treatments I could not pronounce, and her fingers were busy typing on her phone, ignoring the menu. I had raised her alone after her mother, Catherine, passed away when she was 10. I had tried to give her everything I did not have, but somewhere along the way, giving her everything turned into her demanding everything. Next to her was Tyler, her fiancé, a man of 30 who had never worked a physical day in his life. He wore a suit that was too tight, a watch that was too big, and a smile that was too fake. He was currently swirling a glass of wine that cost $40 a sip, acting like he was a sommelier. So the wedding planner said the ice sculptures need to be imported from Sweden. Brittany said, without looking up from her phone. She was scrolling through Instagram, probably looking at other weddings to copy. It is going to cost an extra $8,000, but it is non-negotiable. Dad. The theme is fire and ice, and domestic ice just looks cloudy. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. $8,000 for frozen water that is going to melt on the floor. Brittany. Brittany finally looked up, rolling her eyes with a sigh that suggested I was the most exhausting burden in her life. It is artisan water, Dad. It is clear. It is about the aesthetic you would not understand, because you are used to drinking from a hose. Tyler chuckled, a low, condescending sound that made my knuckles turn white. Garrison. You have to understand the vision, Tyler said, leaning back in his chair. The Glass Chateau is a premier venue. We cannot have low-quality decor. It reflects poorly on us. On my family, I looked at Tyler, his family. The Hallingtons were what I called credit card aristocrats. They drove leased BMWs, lived in a mortgaged mansion, and looked down on anyone who actually worked for a living. They had not contributed a dime to this wedding yet. They had a lot of opinions on how my money should be spent. I looked down at the menu. It was a tasting menu. $200 per person for 7 courses that looked like science experiments. I saw things like foam essence and deconstructed soil. I just wanted a steak. The waiter approached a young man with a sneer that matched the decor. May I start the table with a bottle of the Chateau Margaux? He asked, looking directly at Tyler, assuming he was the one paying. Tyler lit up. Oh, absolutely, excellent choice. I raised a hand. Wait, I said. The waiter paused, looking at me like I was a stain on the tablecloth. How much is the bottle, sir? It is $1,200, the waiter said, his voice dripping with ice. I shook my head. We will have water, tap water, and I will have the house red. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Tyler looked at the waiter with an apologetic grimace, mouthing the word sorry. Brittany slammed her phone down on the table, the screen cracking against the silverware. Oh my God, Dad, she hissed. Her face was turning red, a mix of anger and humiliation. You are embarrassing me. You are actually embarrassing me in public. It is $1,200 for fermented grapes. Brittany, I said, keeping my voice calm. It is wasteful. It is a celebration, Brittany snapped, her voice rising. Heads at nearby tables began to turn. It is a tasting menu. You pair it with good wine. You do not pair it with tap water like some hobo. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You just do not get it. You do not fit in. I looked at her, really. Looked at her, I saw the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders at construction sites. The girl who used to make mud pies while I poured foundations. Where had she gone? When had she been replaced by this creature who measured affection in invoices? I am paying for the dinner. Brittany, I am paying for the wedding. I am paying for your apartment. I think I get a say in the wine. Tyler leaned forward, placing a manicured hand on Brittany's arm, soothing her like she was the victim. Babe, calm down. He is from a different generation, Tyler said, smiling at me with that patronizing look people give to toddlers or the elderly. Garrison look. We appreciate the help, really, but the Hallingtons are coming to the wedding. My parents are used to a certain standard. We cannot be cutting corners on ice and wine. It just looks cheap. I repeated the word, tasting like bile. I built a company from a single pickup truck and a shovel I employed. 300 men. I built the bridge you drive over to get to this restaurant. Do not talk to me about cheap, son. Brittany laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that cut through the ambient jazz music. Oh, here we go again, she mocked, throwing her hands up. The great Garrison Ford and his shovel, we get it. Dad, you dug holes for a living. You played in the dirt, congratulations. You are a glorified sewer rat. The air left my lungs. It was not the first time she had made fun of my work, but it was the first time she had done it with such venom, such genuine disgust. I dug those holes to pay for your private school, I said. My voice barely a whisper, and I poured that concrete to pay for your college degree in art history that you have never used, yeah. And look at you, Brittany sneered, pointing a finger at my chest. You are still wearing that flannel shirt. You still drive that truck that smells like wet dog and sawdust. You have no class, Dad. You have money, sure, but you have no class. You are just a wallet with a pulse, and honestly, having you at the venue, it is going to ruin the vibe. I sat there, frozen. The waiter had retreated to the shadows, watching the drama unfold. I looked at Tyler, waiting for him to defend me, to say that was too far. But Tyler just shrugged, taking a sip of his water. She has a point. Garrison, Tyler said smoothly. Look, we were talking about the seating chart, the head table. It is going to be my parents and some investors, and honestly, you do not really fit the aesthetic. We were thinking maybe we could say you are sick. Sick. I asked, my voice flat. Yeah, Brittany chimed, in her eyes lighting up at the solution. It is perfect. We will say you have a severe flu, or maybe a back injury from all that manual labor. You stay home, you do not have to wear a tuxedo and look uncomfortable. And we do not have to explain why the bride's father looks like he just crawled out of a construction site. Everyone wins. I stared at them, the daughter I had adored. The daughter I had grieved with when her mother died. She was ashamed of me. She did not just want my money. She wanted my absence. She wanted the check, but not the father. So let me get this straight, I said slowly, leaning forward. My hands rested on the table, scarred and calloused hands that had bled for this family. You want me to pay for the wedding? The venue. The flowers from Sweden. The wine, but you do not want me to attend. Brittany huffed, picking up her menu again, as if the conversation was boring her. Basically, yeah, it is for the best, Dad. You would hate it anyway. It is high society, not a union meeting. Just transfer, though. Final $50,000 to the venue coordinator tomorrow morning. They need it by noon to lock in the catering and transfer the money for the honeymoon, too. Tyler found this amazing resort in the Maldives. I looked at Tyler. He was smirking, checking his reflection in his spoon. The Maldives, I said. 5-star. Tyler said, winking. It is the least she deserves, right? The waiter returned, placing a tiny plate in front of me, a single scallop on a bed of green foam. I looked at it. I looked at the price list in my head. $150,000 for the wedding, $10,000 for the dress, $5,000 a month for their rent, plus the credit card bills. I paid every month without asking questions. I reached into my back pocket and felt the leather of my wallet. Inside, tucked behind a picture of my late wife, Catherine, was the Black Centurion card. The card I got when I sold the company, the card that had no limit. I could pull it out right now. I could buy the $1,200 fine saw, could buy the restaurant. I could show them exactly who I was. My fingers brushed the cool metal of the card. It would be so easy to drop it on the table, to watch their eyes pop out of their heads, to watch Tyler choke on his water. But then I looked at Brittany's face. She wasn't looking at me. She was taking a selfie with the scallop, angling the light to make her diamond ring sparkle. The ring I paid for. She didn't deserve to know. She didn't deserve the satisfaction of my wealth. She thought I was a scraping-by pensioner giving her my life savings, and she didn't care. She would bleed me dry and step over my body to get to the open bar. I let go of the black card. Instead, my fingers found a single crumpled $100 bill I kept for emergencies. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Brittany didn't even look up. Where are you going? The bathroom is that way. I am leaving, I said. Tyler laughed. Leaving? We haven't even had the main course. Garrison, sit down. Stop being dramatic. I am not being dramatic, I said, my voice finding the steel resonance it used to have when I ran job sites. I am practical. You said my life is nothing to be proud of. You said I am a sewer rat. You said I should not show up. Brittany rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Dad, I was just being honest. Do not throw a tantrum, huh? I am not throwing a tantrum, Brittany. I am giving you exactly what you asked for. I took the crumpled $100 bill and tossed it onto the pristine white tablecloth. It landed right in the middle of her plate, ruining her photo. What is this? She demanded, looking at the bill like it was infected. That is for my portion of the scallop, I said, and for a taxi home you can handle the rest of the bill since you are high society. Brittany laughed, a nervous sound. You are joking. This dinner is going to be $600. We don't carry cash, Dad. Put your card down. I patted my pocket. No, I said simply. My money has no class, remember? It smells like concrete. You wouldn't want to use it? I turned my back on them. For the first time in her life, I walked away while she was talking. Brittany, his voice rose sharp and shrill. Dad, come back here. You have to transfer that $50,000 tomorrow morning. The venue will cancel if you don't, Dad. I didn't stop. I walked past the shocked waiter, past the hostess stand, and out the heavy glass doors into the cool Seattle rain. The valet looked at me, holding his hand out for a ticket. No ticket, son, I said, walking past him toward the street. My truck is parked 3 blocks away, saving money on parking. I walked through the drizzle, the water cooling the heat on my face. My heart was pounding. Not from exertion, but from a strange, cold clarity. For years I had made excuses for her. She is grieving her mother, she is young, she is under pressure. But tonight the excuses died. I reached my truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that I kept running out of stubbornness. I climbed into the cab, the smell of old coffee and dust welcoming me like an old friend. I sat there in the dark listening to the rain hit the roof. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Brittany. "You are being childish. Transfer the money by 9 a.m. or don't bother talking to me again. And don't forget the honeymoon deposit. Tyler is really stressed." I looked at the message. The glowing screen illuminated the lines on my face, lines earned from years of worry about her. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I started the engine, the old diesel motor roaring to life. It was a rough sound, a loud sound, a sound that lacked refinement. I drove out of the city, leaving the sparkling lights of the high-rise buildings behind me. I didn't go home, not yet. I drove toward the one place where I could think, where I could clear my head. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner near the docks. It was the kind of place where the menu was laminated and the coffee tasted like battery acid. I sat in a booth in the back, watching the container ships unload in the distance. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of apple pie. The waitress, a woman named Marge, who had been working there since I was pouring concrete for the foundation, poured me a cup. "Rough night, Gary?" she asked, seeing my face. "You could say that, Marge," I said. Taking a sip, the hot liquid burned my throat in a good way. "My daughter is getting married on Saturday." Marge smiled. "Oh, that is lovely. You must be proud." I looked at the pie. I remembered buying Brittany, her first bicycle. I remembered holding her hand at the dentist. I remembered paying for her first car, her second car, her third car, after she wrecked the others. "She told me not to come," I said quietly. Marge stopped wiping the counter. She looked at me, her expression hardening. "What?" "Why, she says I am an embarrassment. She says I am a sewer rat. She wants the check, but not the father." Marge shook her head, slamming the rag down. "That is shameful, Gary. After everything you did for that girl, that is shameful." "It is," I agreed. "So what are you going to do?" Marge asked, leaning on the counter. I took a bite of the pie. It was sweet, simple, honest. It didn't need foam. It didn't need liquid nitrogen. "I am going to give her what she wants," I said. Marge looked confused. "You are going to stay home." I smiled, a slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Marge, she asked for a wedding. She asked for a lifestyle she cannot afford. She asked for me to be an invisible wallet." I pulled my phone back out. I opened my banking app. The balance stared back at me, a number with a lot of zeros, a number that gave me the power to build cities or destroy them. I tapped on the contact for my private banker at Chase Wealth Management. It was late, but for the amount of money I had, he would answer. "I am going to make sure she gets exactly the wedding she paid for." I told Marge. I hit the call button. "Hello, Mr. Ford." The banker. S voice was smooth. "Professional, awake, Charles." I said, my voice steady. "I need to make some changes to my accounts. Immediate changes, of course, Mr. Ford." "What do you need?" "Block the secondary credit card ending in 4598, the one Brittany has reported as lost or stolen. No, report it as compromised. Freeze it completely." There was a pause on the line. "Very well, sir, and the transfer scheduled for the Glass Chateau tomorrow morning, $50,000. "Cancel it," I said. "Cancel it, sir. Cancel it." "And Charles," "Yes, Mr. Ford. I need you to pull the records for every transaction on that supplementary card for the last 5 years. I want an itemized list, every latte, every dress, every flight. I want to know exactly what she has spent." "I can have that for you by morning, sir." "Is everything all right?" "Everything is finally clear." "Charles, just do it." I hung up the phone. Marge was watching me. her eyes wide. "You are cutting her off," she whispered. I finished my coffee. "I am not just cutting her off. Marge, I am pulling the foundation out from under the house. I am going to let gravity do the rest." I left a $20 tip on a $5 check and walked out of the diner. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp and clean. I got back into my truck and drove home to my modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. The house Brittany hated. The house she called a shack. I walked inside and went straight to my home office. I opened the safe hidden behind the bookshelf. Inside were the deeds to the apartment Brittany lived in, the title to Tyler S. car, and the trust documents I had drawn up, leaving them everything. I took them all out and laid them on the desk. I sat there under the hum of the desk lamp and began to work. I wasn't a contractor anymore. Tonight, I was a demolition expert. I picked up a red pen and started circling the clauses in the lease agreement for the apartment. The apartment I owned. The apartment where they lived. Rent-free while mocking the man who provided the roof. My phone buzzed again, another text from Brittany, "Dad. I am serious. If that money isn't there by 9 a.m., I am telling everyone you are senile. Tyler says we should look into power of attorney. Do not test me." I laughed, a dry, rasping sound in the empty house. Power of attorney. She wanted to play legal games. She wanted to threaten the man who read contracts for breakfast. I looked at the calendar. Wednesday, the wedding was Saturday. 3 days to dismantle a life of entitlement. 3 days to prepare the lesson. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours going through bank statements, highlighting charges, calculating interest. By the time the sun came up, I had a spreadsheet that told a story of greed so profound it made my stomach turn. Brittany and Tyler weren't just spending my money. They were hemorrhaging it. And worse, they were leveraging assets they didn't own. There were loans. In my name, I didn't recognize crypto investments that had gone to zero. Gambling debts linked to Tyler S. name paid off from the joint account. They weren't just ungrateful, they were thieves. At 8 a.m., I called my lawyer, Blackwood. Garrison. Blackwood answered, his voice gravelly, like mine. "You are up early. I need you at the house, Blackwood," I said. "I have a job for you." "What kind of job?" "Forensic accounting, and eviction, and possibly criminal fraud." Blackwood whistled low. "I will be there in 20 minutes. Coffee black. Blackwood arrived at 8:30. He was a shark in a cheap suit, the only lawyer I trusted because he hated everyone equally. He looked at the pile of documents on my desk and raised an eyebrow. "This is your daughter we are talking about." "Garrison, not anymore," I said, handing him the spreadsheet. "This is a parasite, and I am the host, and I am done feeding it." Blackwood reviewed the papers, his eyes scanning the numbers. "Jesus, Garrison, do you know, she took out a second mortgage on the condo. You co-signed the original, but she forged your signature on the equity line." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. "Orgery, yeah," Blackwood said, tapping the paper. "Look at the date. You were in Chicago for the conference. She signed it here, notarized, by a friend of hers, I bet. This is a felony." I looked at the signature. It was a shaky imitation of mine. A child's attempt at theft. "I want everything exposed," I said. "I want every debt, every lie, every stolen dime documented." "And then what?" Blackwood asked. Looking at me over his glasses, "You want to send her to jail?" I looked out the window at the garden Catherine had planted. The roses were blooming despite the neglect. I said, "I don't want jail. Jail is too easy. Jail is 3 meals a day and a roof." "Then what?" I turned back to Blackwood. "The wedding is Saturday. All of her friends will be there. Tyler's family will be there. The influencers, the society snobs, everyone she tries to impress." Blackwood smiled, a cruel shark-like smile. "You are going to the wedding," he stated. "Oh yes," I said. I am going to the wedding, but I am not going to sit in the back and be invisible. I picked up the black Centurion card and tapped it on the desk. I am going to be the center of attention. My phone rang. It was Brittany calling to check on the transfer. I let it ring. Let the panic set in, I told Blackwood. We have work to do that morning, while Brittany was likely screaming at a venue coordinator about a missing payment. I was liquidating the trust fund. I was rewriting my will. I was preparing a presentation. By noon, my phone had 50 missed calls. By 1 p.m. Tyler left a voicemail threatening to come over. By 2 p.m., I was at the tailor's getting fitted for a tuxedo. Not a rental, a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that cost $6,000. Because if I was going to destroy their world, I was going to look like the owner of the company while I did it. I stood in front of the mirror at the tailor's, the tailor pinning the hem of the trousers. I looked at the old man in the reflection. The flannel was gone. The work boots were gone. In their place was a man of power, a man of means. I am sorry, sir, the tailor said, noticing my expression. Is the fit uncomfortable? No, I said, straightening my tie. The fit is perfect. Just haven't seen this man in a long time. I walked out of the shop and into the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed again, a text from Brittany Fine. You win. I will let you sit at the family table. Just send the money, please, Dad. The venue is threatening to lock the doors. I looked at the message and typed a reply for the first time in 24 hours, handling it. See you at the wedding. I hit send and tossed the phone into the passenger seat. The trap was set. I drove to the bank to meet with the wealth management team. As I walked into the lobby, the branch manager rushed over to greet me. Mr. Ford, we received your instructions. Everything is frozen. The supplementary cards are canceled. The checks have been stopped. Good, I said. And sir, regarding the wedding venue, they called us trying to run the card on file. We declined it as per your instruction. Did they say anything? They said the bride was in tears, sir. They said she offered to write a personal check, but it bounced. I nodded, emotionless. Let it bounce, I said. I walked out of the bank feeling lighter than I had in years. The guilt was gone, the obligation was gone. All that was left was the lesson, and class was about to be in session. The rain drummed a heavy, rhythmic beat against the metal roof of my Ford F-150, sealing me inside the cab like a diver in a bell. The smell of old diesel and stale coffee was comforting, a sharp contrast to the perfumed air of the restaurant I had just left. My hands gripping the steering wheel were no longer shaking. The humiliation I had felt inside. The obsidian room was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical precision. It was the same feeling I used to get before demolishing a condemned building. You check the charges, you clear the perimeter, and you wait for the dust to settle. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an older model, the screen cracked in the corner from when I dropped it on a job site 2 years ago. To Brittany and Tyler, it was just another piece of junk belonging to a dinosaur. But the contact list inside held numbers that could move mountains, or in this case, freeze oceans. I scrolled past the family group chat, which was currently lighting up with angry messages from my daughter, and found the number I needed. It was listed simply as Chase Private Wealth Direct. It was a line reserved for clients who held 8 figures or more in liquid assets. Clients whose time was literally money. It was 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, but I knew someone would answer. They always answered. I pressed the call button and listened to the ring. It rang once, twice, Mr. Ford. A voice answered, smooth and professional, crisp as a fresh banknote. It was Charles, my senior account manager. Charles had been handling my portfolio since the sale of Ford Infrastructure. He knew better than anyone that the man in the flannel shirt was the same man whose capital gains tax could fund a small municipality. Good evening, Charles, I said. My voice sounded different. It was deeper, rougher. It was not the voice of the apologetic father who had just been scolded over a dinner bill. It was the voice of the CEO who had once stared down union strikes and city council bureaucrats, Mr. Ford. Charles repeated his tone, shifting slightly, sensing the gravity in my silence. To what do I owe the pleasure at this hour? Is everything all right with the portfolio? The portfolio is fine, Charles, I said, staring out the windshield at the blurred city lights. But we need to execute some immediate administrative changes regarding the family access protocols, and I waited, letting the words hang in the air. In the world of high finance, administrative changes usually meant a divorce or a death, and I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. On the other end, Charles was pulling up my file. I am listening, sir, Charles said. First, I said. Let us talk about the supplementary Centurion card issued to my daughter, Brittany Ford, the one ending in 4598. I see it here, Charles said. Active status, high volume usage this month. Freeze it, I said. There was a brief pause on the line. Sir, do you mean place a temporary hold for travel or security? Charles, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I mean kill it. Report it as compromised. Report it as lost. I do not care which code you use, just make sure that if she tries to buy a pack of gum in 5 minutes, that card is nothing more than a piece of black plastic. Very well, sir. Card 4598 is being suspended as we speak. The change is immediate. Good. Now the second item. There is a cashier check pending clearance issued yesterday from the primary checking account, payable to the Glass Chateau for $50,000. Yes, sir, I see it. It is currently in the clearinghouse, scheduled to post by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Stop it, I said. Sir, stopping. A cashier check of that magnitude. Once it has entered the system, requires a specific authorization code and usually a reason for the record. Is there a dispute with the vendor? There is no dispute with the vendor, I said, watching a raindrop trace a path down the glass. The dispute is with the reality of the situation. Stop payment on the check. Revoke the authorization. If the venue calls, tell them the funds are no longer available from this source, funds revoked. Charles said, the clicking of his keyboard intensifying. Done. The check will bounce if they attempt to deposit it tomorrow. Excellent. Is there anything else, Mr. Ford? Charles asked, his voice cautious. He knew something was happening, something seismic. Yes, I said, leaning back against the worn fabric of the seat. One last thing, Charles. I need a forensic audit of that supplementary card. A forensic audit, sir. I want to see everything. Charles, go back 5 years since the day I gave her that card. I want an itemized spreadsheet. Every transaction, every location, every timestamp. I want to know where every single cent of my money went. I want to know if she bought groceries or if she bought influence. I want to know if she paid for tuition or if she paid for her fiancé's gambling debts. I want it all in a PDF sent to my secure email by sunrise. That is a significant amount of data to process overnight, sir, Charles said. You manage $18 million of my liquid assets. Charles, I imagine you can manage a spreadsheet. Understood, sir. You will have it by 6 a.m. Thank you, Charles. Mr. Ford. Charles hesitated just for a second. Is everything all right, sir? You sound different. I am just fine, Charles, I said, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The eyes staring back were hard flinty. I'm just doing a little renovation. Cleaning house. Have a good night, sir. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and sat in the silence of the truck cab. The engine was idling, a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of total control. I had just cut the lifeline. I had just turned off the tap that had been watering a garden of weeds. The $50,000 for the venue was gone. The credit limit that allowed Brittany to live like a princess while treating me like a pauper was gone. I imagined Brittany at the bridal shop tomorrow, or at the florist, trying to swipe that sleek black card, expecting the magic of her father's. It's hard work to save her again. I imagined the machine beeping the red letters. Declined, flashing on the screen. I imagined the confusion, then the panic, then the realization. She had called me worthless. She had said I was nothing to be proud of. Well, she was about to find out exactly how much my worth had been supporting her worthless existence. I put the truck in gear, the transmission clunking reassuringly. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need music. The sound of the tires on the wet pavement was enough. I drove out of the city limits, leaving the skyline behind, heading toward the suburbs, where my modest, paid-off house waited for me. The house Brittany was ashamed of. The house that was built on solid ground, not on credit and lies. As I drove, I felt the transformation complete. The sad old man who just wanted to be included was gone. In his place was the man who knew the value of $1 and the price of disrespect. I was not just a father anymore. I was the bank, and the bank was foreclosing. The office of Marcus Blackwood was located in a pre-war building in the financial district, the kind of place that had no sign on the door and required a key card just to access the elevator. It smelled of mahogany leather and the distinct metallic scent of cold, hard cash waiting to be litigated. I sat in a chair that probably cost more than my truck, watching Blackwood pour 2 glasses of single malt scotch. It was 9 in the morning, but looking at the stack of files on his desk, I had a feeling we were going to need it. Blackwood slid a glass across the desk to me. His eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, held a flicker of something that looked dangerously like pity. He opened the leather-bound folder in front of him, and the sound of the heavy paper turning was the only noise in the room. "You know, Garrison," Blackwood started, his voice low and gravelly. "Have handled divorces for billionaires. I have cleaned up messes for senators. I have seen greed in every flavor it comes in, but this is impressive. In the worst possible way." I took a sip of the scotch, letting the burn settle my stomach. "Give it to me straight, Marcus. I did not build Ford infrastructure by hiding from bad news. If the bridge is cracking, I need to know where the stress fractures are." Blackwood nodded, respecting the language. He knew my history. He knew that before I was the old man in the flannel shirt, I was the CEO who managed 4,000 employees and billions in government contracts. He knew I had negotiated with governors and stared down union bosses. The man who sold his company for $18 million cash was still in the room, even if his daughter had forgotten he existed. He spun the file around so I could see the spreadsheet. The numbers were printed in red ink, rows and rows of them stretching down the page like a list of casualties. "Let us start with the housing asset," Blackwood said, pointing a manicured finger at the top line. "The condo in Belltown, the one you bought outright 5 years ago? The deed is in your name, correct?" "Correct," I said. "I bought it so she would always have a roof over her head, no mortgage, just HOA fees." Blackwood sighed. "Well, about that, it turns out Brittany has been quite creative. She forged a power of attorney document about 18 months ago, claiming you were mentally incapacitated due to early onset dementia. She used a notary who curiously shares a last name with Tyler S. college roommate." My hand tightened around the glass. "Mentally incapacitated, yes," Blackwood continued. "She used that document to take out a home equity line of credit against the condo. The full value, Garrison. She pulled out $600,000 in equity." I felt a ringing in my ears. $600,000, and it is gone, Blackwood said bluntly. "All of it. Look here." He flipped the page. $200,000 went into a cryptocurrency exchange account linked to Tyler Hallington. Name. According to my forensic guy, that account is currently sitting at a balance of $12.40. They bought at the peak and sold at the bottom. Another $100,000 went to a luxury car dealership for a Porsche Cayenne that I believe Tyler drives, putting it in his name, of course, and the rest. It is a black hole of lifestyle spending. Private jets to Vegas, 5-star hotels, designer clothes. It is bleeding out, Garrison, thousands of dollars a day. I looked at the itemized list, seeing the dates. The dates matched times when she had called me crying, saying she couldn't afford groceries, saying she needed money for heating bills. I had sent her checks every single time, believing her, thinking I was helping my struggling daughter while she was flying private to Las Vegas. "This is not just irresponsibility," I said, my voice cold and steady. "This is grand larceny. This is fraud. It is a federal crime," Blackwood agreed, leaning back. "If we file charges, she is looking at 10 to 15 years. Minimum, the forgery alone is 5 years." I looked at the documents, seeing not just the numbers but the betrayal printed in black and white. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike. I remembered her small hand in mine when we buried her mother. Now that same hand had forged my signature to steal a fortune. I closed the file. The sound was final, like a cell door slamming. I built Ford infrastructure on a simple principle. I said, looking Blackwood in the eye. Integrity. You do the work, you get paid. You cut corners. The structure collapses, she cut corners. Marcus, she compromised the integrity of this family. "So we file charges?" Blackwood asked, reaching for his pen. I stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the gray Seattle skyline. I had built parts of that skyline. I knew what went into making something stand tall, and I knew what it took to bring it down. "Not yet," I said, turning back to him. "Filing charges now would be a mercy. It would be a sterile legal proceeding. I want her to feel the collapse. I want her to stand in the rubble of the life she tried to build on a lie." Blackwood smiled, a slow, predatory grin that showed why he was the best in the city. "What do you have in mind? The wedding is in 48 hours, I said. "I want you to prepare a document packet, a full disclosure of debts, a notice of eviction for the condo, a civil suit for the recovery of the $600,000. And I want the revocation of the trust fund." "The trust fund," Blackwood whistled. "The one set up for her future children." "It is gone," I said. "If she will steal from her father, she will steal from her children. I am redirecting the assets, the entire $18 million. It goes to the Garrison Ford Scholarship Fund for structural engineering students. Kids who actually want to work for a living." Blackwood began typing furiously, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I can have the papers drawn up by noon. We will need to serve her. No process server," I said. "I will serve her myself." At the wedding, Blackwood stopped typing, looking up at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. "You are going to do it at the ceremony?" "No," I said, smoothing the front of my flannel shirt. "Not the ceremony, the reception. The dinner. When she is surrounded by the people she tried so hard to impress, when she is pretending to be royalty, that is when I will remind her she is a subject. And Marcus, yes, Garrison, I want you there. I want you standing next to me with the files. When the Hallingtons try to intervene, when Tyler tries to spin some story, I want you to hand them the audit of the crypto account. I want you to show them exactly how much their son is worth." Blackwood nodded, a gleam in his eye. "It would be my pleasure. I have never liked the Hallingtons, arrogant people with empty pockets." I walked back to the desk and picked up the file, holding it like a weapon. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about legacy. It was about the name Ford. My father was a bricklayer. I was a contractor. We built things that lasted. Brittany and Tyler were termites, eating away at the wood from the inside. "There is one more thing," I said, tapping the file. "The Porsche. The one Tyler bought with my equity." "Yes, repo it," Blackwood said, finishing my thought. "Repo it," I confirmed. "But not today. Do it during the ceremony. Have the tow truck waiting outside the glass chateau when they walk out as husband and wife. I want them to see their getaway car being dragged away on a flatbed." Blackwood laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Garrison, you are a cold son of a bitch." "I learned from the best," I said, thinking of the concrete and steel that had been my life for so long. "You cannot build on a rotten foundation. Marcus, you have to tear it out. You have to dig it up and start over." I turned to leave the office, the file tucked under my arm. I had work to do. I had to go to the bank. I had to go to the tailor and I had to prepare for the role of a lifetime. As I reached the door, Blackwood called out, "Garrison." I turned back. "Are you sure about this, huh? Once we pull this trigger, there is no going back. She is your only child." I looked at the man who had been with me through union strikes and market crashes, through the death of my wife and the sale of my life's work. I know I said my voice devoid of emotion. But the daughter I raised died a long time ago. The woman who forged those documents is a stranger, and strangers do not get access to the Ford accounts. I walked out into the hallway, the heavy door clicking shut behind me, sealing the deal. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into war. I checked my phone. 20 more missed calls from Brittany. A text from Tyler asking if the check had cleared. I didn't reply. I stepped out onto the street, the rain hitting my face, mixing with the resolve hardening in my gut. They wanted a show. They wanted the perfect wedding. Was going to give them a performance they would never forget. I sat in the cab of my truck, parked across the street from the luxury high-rise condo building in Belltown. The building where my daughter lived, the building I owned but hadn't visited in months. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black, reflecting the neon signs of the coffee shops and yoga studios that lined the block. It was a neighborhood for people who wanted to be seen, not for people who wanted to build. On the passenger seat lay the second manila envelope Blackwood had given me, the one labeled Hallington Due Diligence. I picked it up. The paper felt heavy, thick with secrets. I had spent the morning looking at the numbers, the raw data of the theft. But numbers are cold, impersonal. Now I needed to look at the human element. I needed to understand the man my daughter was about to marry, the man she had destroyed her integrity to impress. I unwound the string on the envelope and slid the papers out under the dome. Light. Tyler Hallington. 30 years old. Self-proclaimed venture capitalist and private equity consultant according to his LinkedIn profile and the way he introduced himself at dinner parties. I flipped past the headshot. A glossy photo of him wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, smiling like he owned the world. Then I looked at the employment history. Blackwood's investigator had dug up. It was a blank page. There was no venture capital firm. There was no consulting agency. The LLC he claimed to run, Hallington Global Strategies, had been dissolved by the state 3 years ago for failure to pay a $50 filing fee. His last recorded employment was a 6-month stint as a sales associate at a high-end watch store 5 years ago. He was fired for inventory discrepancies. I turned the page to his income verification. The IRS returns, or lack thereof, painted a stark picture. Adjusted gross income for the last 3 years. 0. Tyler Hallington wasn't a businessman. He was an unemployed grifter playing dress-up. And he was playing it on my dime. I looked up at the condo building at the windows on the 12th floor, where the lights were blazing. I imagined them up there, Tyler, probably drinking my scotch. Brittany probably frantically refreshing her banking app, wondering why the transfer hadn't hit. And that was when the real knife twisted in my gut. Brittany knew she had to know you don't live with someone for 3 years and not know they don't have a job. You don't sign tax returns with 0 income and think your fiancé is a titan of industry. She knew he was a fraud, and instead of leaving him, instead of finding a man with a shred of ambition or dignity, she had decided to fund his charade. She had stolen my money, forged my signature, and mortgaged her future just to keep him in designer loafers. She had bought herself a prop husband so she could play the role of the power couple. I felt a physical ache in my chest, a hollow throbbing, where my pride used to be. I thought about Catherine, my late wife. I thought about how we scraped pennies together to buy our first fixer-upper, how we celebrated with cheap pizza on the floor of an empty living room, dreaming about the life we would build for our daughter. We wanted to give her the world, but we forgot to teach her that the world has a price tag, and you have to earn the right to pay it. I had raised a viper. Not a wolf who hunts for survival, but a viper who strikes the hand that feeds it simply because it is there. She wasn't a victim of Tyler S. Kahn, she was his co-conspirator. She had looked at my legacy, my blood and sweat, and saw nothing but a resource to be strip-mined to prop up a loser. I looked back down at the file. There were photos attached, surveillance shots. Blackwood S. guy had taken Tyler leaving a casino at 4 a.m. Tyler driving the Porsche. I paid for with a blonde woman who definitely wasn't Brittany in the passenger seat. I stared at the grainy image of the blonde woman. Did Brittany know about this too? Was she so desperate to maintain the illusion of perfection that she allowed him to humiliate her as long as he looked good in the wedding photos? The sadness washed over me, a tidal wave of grief for the little girl who used to wait for me on the porch when I came home from work. The girl who smelled like strawberry shampoo and innocence. That girl was dead. She had been consumed by the monster of entitlement. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old leather and dust inside the truck. The grief began to recede, pulling back like the tide to reveal something harder underneath. Something sharp and jagged. Resolve. I wasn't sad anymore. I was done. I shoved the photos back into the envelope and tossed it onto the seat next to the financial audit. If she wanted a fake life, I would give her a dose of reality so potent it would burn the fantasy to the ground. She wanted to marry a fraud, fine. She could marry him, but she would do it without the Ford safety net. She would do it in the cold, hard light of day, where bills come due and credit limits exist. I started the truck. The engine growled a low, angry sound that matched the vibration in my chest. I looked up at the condo one last time. Enjoy the view. Brittany, I whispered to the glass and steel tower. Enjoy the lights and the warmth. Because the power is about to be cut, I put the truck in gear and pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. I had appointments to keep. I had a tuxedo to pick up. I had a wedding to crash. The pain of the betrayal had crystallized into a diamond, hard determination. I was going to teach them a lesson, not out of hate, but out of the last shred of fatherly duty I had left. I was going to teach them that the only thing you truly own in this world is your name. And by the time I was finished, theirs would be mud. While I was sitting in my truck staring at the evidence of my son-in-law's fraud across town, my daughter was standing on a pedestal in Lumiere Bridal, surrounded by mirrors that reflected her own vanity back at her a dozen times over. She was there for her final fitting. The dress was a custom silk masterpiece imported from Milan, costing $12,000, and she looked like a princess who was about to find out the castle had been foreclosed. According to the timestamp on the voicemail, she left me later. It happened at exactly 10:15. The sales associate, a woman with the patience of a saint and a smile practiced in the face of bridezillas, approached with the card reader. "Miss Ford," the associate said softly. "The alterations are perfect. The total balance due for the rush fees and the veil comes to $4,200. Brittany didn't even look at the woman. She just extended her hand holding the black card between two manicured fingers, like she was bestowing a favor upon a peasant. "Just run it," she said, checking her makeup in the trifold mirror. "And make sure you wrap it in the archival plastic. I do not want any dust on it before Saturday." The associate swiped the card. There was a pause, a heavy silence in the boutique, interrupted only by the soft hum of the air conditioning, and then a sharp beep, the sound of rejection. "I am sorry, Ms. Ford," the associate said, frowning at the machine. "It says declined," Brittany laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound that bounced off the glass walls. "Do not be ridiculous. It is a Centurion card. It does not decline. Try it again. You probably swiped it wrong." The woman swiped it again. "Beep, declined, Miss Ford. The card has been reported as lost or stolen. The system is locking me out. I cannot process this." Brittany spun around on the pedestal, nearly tripping on the hem of her gown. "What are you talking about? I used it this morning for coffee. Give it to me." She snatched the card from the woman's hand and stared at it as if the plastic itself had betrayed her. Her face flushed a deep, angry red, matching the rising panic in her chest. She grabbed her purse and pulled out another card. I back up. Visa also linked to my account. Try this one, she snapped, shoving it at the woman. Beep declined. Brittany's hands began to shake. The other brides in the shop were watching now. The illusion of the wealthy heiress was cracking, peeling away to reveal the terrified child underneath. This is a mistake, Brittany hissed, her voice rising to a shriek. My father probably forgot to authorize a travel alert or something stupid like that. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much money my family has? We know who you are, Ms. Ford. The manager stepped in, her voice cool and firm, but without payment. We cannot release the dress. It is store policy. You are not keeping my dress, Brittany screamed, tearing the veil from her head. It is my wedding in 2 days. You are ruining everything. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, dialing my number. She didn't care who heard her. She didn't care about dignity. She just wanted the obstacle removed. I saw her name flash on my phone screen as I sat in my truck, watching the rain start to fall again. I watched the phone vibrate on the passenger seat, buzzing like an angry insect. I didn't reach for it. I didn't feel the urge to answer, to fix it, to soothe her. I just let it ring back. In the bridal shop, Brittany listened to the ringing on the other end. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, followed by the click of my voicemail. Dad, she screamed into the phone, her voice echoing off the silk and lace. Pick up the phone right now. You incompetent old man, you froze the cards, didn't you? You forgot to pay the bill, or you messed something up, and now I am standing here looking like an idiot. Fix this. Fix it now, or I swear to God I will never speak to you again. Do you hear me? Transfer the money. She ended the call, breathing hard, her chest heaving. The manager crossed her arms, blocking the path to the door. Ms. Ford, the dress. Please, Brittany looked at the woman, then at the dress she was wearing, the dress she couldn't pay for. The dress that suddenly felt heavy, like a shroud. She wasn't a princess anymore. She was just a girl in a costume she couldn't afford, and the bill had finally come due. I pulled my truck up to the curb outside the glass tower in Belltown, where my daughter lived, the building I secretly owned, and turned off the engine. The rain had started again, a steady Seattle drizzle that grayed out the world, perfectly matching the performance I was about to give. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting my face, forcing the hard lines of the CEO to soften into the confused wrinkles of a pensioner. I messed up my hair slightly, untucked one side of my flannel shirt, and let my shoulders slump. It was time to play the part of the bumbling old man, the incompetent father who was overwhelmed by the modern world. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wet asphalt, and stepped out into the cold. I didn't walk with my usual stride, that ground-eating pace of a man who has walked miles of construction sites. Instead, I shuffled, hesitated. I looked like a man who had lost his way. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of anticipation. This was not a visit, it was a reconnaissance mission. I knocked on the door of apartment 12B, a door I had paid for. A door that protected the girl who wanted me dead to the world. It flew open before I could knock a second time. Brittany stood there, and she looked like a hurricane had hit a Sephora. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, her hair was a tangled mess, and she was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask how I was. She just screamed, "Where is the money?" She pulled me inside and slammed the door, the sound echoing off the minimalist concrete walls I had poured. She paced around the living room, a beautiful manicured tiger in a cage of her own making. "Do you have any idea what you did?" she hissed, spinning around to face me. "Do you have any idea how humiliated I was?" The dress shop, the florist, the caterer, everyone called Dad. Everyone. My card was declined. Everywhere. They looked at me like I was a criminal, like I was broke. I stood in the entryway clutching my old baseball cap in my hands, looking at the floor. I let my hands tremble just a little bit. It wasn't hard, the rage in my gut was making my whole body vibrate, but I channeled it into fear, into confusion. I am sorry. Pumpkin, I stammered, keeping my voice low and shaky. I do not know what happened. I went to the gas station this morning to get coffee and the machine, it made this loud beeping noise. It said, "Error! Error!" she screamed, throwing her hands up. It didn't say error, it said insufficient funds or lost or stolen. You froze the accounts, didn't you? You are punishing me because I was mean to you at dinner. I looked up at her, widening my eyes in feigned innocence. Punishing you? No, honey. No, I would never. I called the bank, I called the number on the back of the card, and she demanded, stepping closer, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive perfume and desperation. What did they say? They said something about a security alert. I said, scratching my head, playing the part of the digital illiterate. They said there was too much activity, too many big purchases all at once. They think it might be fraud. They locked everything, Brittany. The checking, the savings, the credit lines. They said they need to investigate. Brittany stopped pacing. Her face went pale. Fraud. Yes, I said. They asked me if I authorized a charge for a private jet to Las Vegas. They asked about a crypto exchange. They said it looked suspicious. I told them I didn't know anything about crypto. I told them I just pay the bills. I watched her eyes dart back and forth. I could see the wheels turning inside her head. She knew exactly what those charges were. She knew she had made them, but she also knew that if she admitted it, she would have to admit to stealing from me. So she did what she always did. She pivoted. It is a mistake, she said quickly, her voice shrill. It is obviously a system error. The bank is stupid. You need to fix it, Dad. You need to call them back right now and tell them to unlock it. The wedding is in 48 hours. I need that money. I sighed heavily, slumping onto the edge of her white Italian sofa. I tried, honey, I really did. I spent 2 hours on the phone with a machine. It kept asking for codes and passwords. I don't know my passwords, Brittany. You know I write everything down in my little book, but I couldn't find the book. And then the lady on the phone said, I had to come into the branch personally to verify my identity, so go, she snapped. Go to the branch. I am just so tired, Brittany, I said, rubbing my eyes, letting my shoulders drop even further. I am old, honey. My back hurts. My head is spinning from all these numbers. I don't understand why they make it so hard. I just want to help you, but I feel like I am drowning in paperwork. I don't know if I can handle the stress of going down there and arguing. With those bankers, I might just wait until next week when I feel better. Next week, she shrieked. The sound was glass shattering. Next week, I will be married. Next week is too late. I need the money today, tomorrow morning at the latest. You cannot wait. You have to go. I looked at her with sad, watery eyes. I tried to find a single spark of concern for me. Just one tiny ember of empathy for her aging father, who was apparently having a breakdown. But there was nothing. Her eyes were flat, dead, things shiny with greed and panic. She didn't care if I died in that bank lobby, as long as the transfer went through before my heart stopped. I don't know if I can do it, honey, I said, my voice breaking. I get so confused when they start talking about equity and interest rates and authentication. I might say the wrong thing. I might lock it up forever by accident. Brittany stared at me, and then a light came on in her eyes. A predatory light. It was the look of a wolf, realizing the sheep is limp. Fine, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. If you are too old and confused to handle your own money, then maybe you shouldn't be handling it. What do you mean? I asked, blinking rapidly. I mean, let me do it, she said, stepping closer, her voice taking on a sickeningly sweet tone. Dad, you are obviously stressed. You shouldn't have to deal with the bank. You shouldn't have to worry about passwords and codes. You should be resting. You should be getting ready for the wedding. She sat down next to me, putting a hand on my knee. Her touch felt like ice. I can go to the bank for you, she said. I can talk to them. I speak their language. I can explain that the charges were authorized, that it was just wedding expenses. I can unlock the accounts. But they said I have to be there, I said weakly. They said only the account holder. Not if you give me permission, she said, squeezing my knee. Not if you sign a paper saying I can handle it for you, a power of attorney. Just for this, just so I can fix the wedding and make sure you don't have to stress. I looked at her, pretending to think it over, pretending to struggle with the decision. I saw the hunger in her face. She saw an opening. She saw a way to bypass the gatekeeper completely. If she had power of attorney, she wouldn't need to ask for money anymore. She could just take it. She could drain the accounts, sell the house, and leave me with nothing. And she was willing to do it. She was eager to do it. You would do that for me, I asked, my voice trembling with fake gratitude. You would handle the bank so I don't have to. Of course, Dad, she said, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I am your daughter. I want to help you. It is too much for you. You said it yourself. You are getting old. You need someone to take over, I nodded slowly, wiping a fake tear from my eye. You are right, Pumpkin. You are such a good girl. I am just a confused old man. I don't know what I would do without you. Then let us fix it, she said, standing up briskly, the sweet act dropping as soon as she got what she wanted. I will call Tyler. He knows a lawyer. We can get the papers drawn up tonight. You sign them, I go to the bank tomorrow, and everything is back to normal. You can just relax, okay? I said quietly. Okay, let's do that. She grabbed her phone and walked into the kitchen, already dialing Tyler. I could hear her voice, sharp and excited, telling him that I had cracked, that I was handing over the keys to the kingdom. I sat on the sofa, alone in the room, and allowed myself a small, cold smile. She thought she had won. She thought she was taking control of a senile old man's fortune. She didn't know she was signing her own confession. She didn't know that the lawyer she was about to call was already waiting for my signal, and the papers I would sign were not the papers she thought they were. She was walking right into the trap, and she was running to get there. Tyler was already pouring the champagne when the doorbell rang. He was wearing a velvet smoking jacket that looked ridiculous in the middle of the afternoon, and his face was flushed with the anticipation of spending money he hadn't earned. He looked at me sitting slumped in the corner of the beige sectional like I was a piece of old furniture that was about to be hauled away to the dump. Shawnily, he said, raising his glass toward Brittany. The notary. Your dad actually came through. Brittany didn't look at me. She was pacing the living room floor, checking her watch every 30 seconds. She was vibrating with a mix of adrenaline and greed, the way an addict looks right before the fix. Just get the door, Tyler, she snapped. I want this done. The bank closes in an hour. Tyler set his glass down and strutted to the door, swinging it open with a flourish. Standing in the hallway was a man in a rumpled gray suit, holding a battered briefcase. He wore thick, wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his eyes and a hat pulled low over his forehead. He looked like every overworked, underpaid bureaucrat in the city. He looked harmless. It was Marcus Blackwood. Had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Blackwood had committed to the role completely. He shuffled into the room, wiping rain from his glasses, looking around the sleek apartment with an expression of mild confusion. Mr. Ford, he asked, looking at Tyler. No. Tyler scoffed, pointing a thumb at me. The old guy in the corner. Mr. Hallington, I am handling the logistics. Blackwood mumbled, clutching his briefcase to his chest. Of course, the agency said this was a rush job, priority notarization for a power of attorney transfer. He walked over to the coffee table and began unpacking his bag. His movements were slow, deliberate, clumsy. He pulled out a stack of documents thick as a phone book and a heavy black stamp. I sat up slowly, groaning as I shifted my weight, keeping up the act of the frail old man. Is that the paper? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. the one that lets Brittany talk to the bank. Brittany was at the table in an instant, hovering over Blackwood like a vulture. "Yes, Dad," she said. Impatient, snatching the top document from the stack. "It is the power of attorney. It gives me full control over the accounts so I can fix the mess you made. Just sign it." She shoved the paper toward me, pointing to the signature line at the bottom. I reached for it, my hand shaking, but Blackwood placed a hand over the paper, stopping her. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice nasally and officious. "Protocol requires that I explain the document to the signatory to ensure capacity." Brittany glared at him. "He knows what it is. We explained it to him. He is just old, not deaf. Just let him sign." Blackwood didn't budge. He looked at me, peering over the rim of his glasses. "Sir, do you understand that by signing this document, you are granting this woman access to your financial affairs?" I looked at Brittany. Her eyes were wide, pleading, and predatory. I looked at Tyler, who was already scrolling through his phone. "Probably looking at new cars, I understand," I said softly. "I just want the wedding to happen. I just want my little girl to be happy." Brittany softened, just a fraction. A smile that looked almost genuine appeared on her face. "I will be happy, Dad. Just sign the paper and everything will be perfect." Blackwood nodded slowly. He pulled the document back and shuffled the stack. I saw his hands move quick as a magician swapping a card. The document Brittany had looked at, the standard power of attorney, slid to the bottom. The document that replaced it looked identical on the surface. The same font, the same header, but the text in the middle, the text block that Blackwood was now smoothing out on the table, was very different. It was a binding assumption of debt and liability agreement. It was a legal masterpiece Blackwood had drafted that morning. By signing it. Brittany wasn't just becoming my agent. She was accepting full personal responsibility for every debt incurred on the supplementary cards and every contract signed for the wedding. She was legally transferring the burden of the $600,000 from my estate to her own name, acknowledging that the spending was for her sole benefit. "Sign here, sir," Blackwood said, pointing to a line that designated me as the assigner. I picked up the pen. I hesitated, letting the tip hover over the paper. "Are you sure this is the right one, honey?" I asked, looking up at her with watery eyes. "It has a lot of words." Brittany rolled her eyes, grabbing my hand and forcing the pen down. "Just do it, Dad. Sign your name," I signed. My signature was shaky, a perfect imitation of an old man losing his grip. "Done," she said, reaching for the paper. "Wait," Blackwood said, sharp and authoritative. "The agent must sign as well to accept the appointment and the liability." He pointed to the line below mine, the line clearly labeled "Accepting Party." Brittany didn't even read the header. She didn't read the paragraph above the line that stated in bold text, "The undersigned hereby accepts full financial responsibility for all outstanding balances and indemnifies the assigner against all claims." She just saw the empty line. She saw the finish line. She grabbed the pen from my hand and signed her name with a flourish. A big looping signature that screamed arrogance. "There," she said, slamming the pen down. "Are we done?" Blackwood pulled the document away, blowing on the ink. He stamped it with a thud that sounded like a gavel falling. "Notarized," he said, slipping the paper into a separate folder inside his briefcase, effectively sealing it away from prying eyes. "That concludes the transaction." Brittany let out a scream of delight. She turned and hugged Tyler, jumping up and down. "We did it! We are back in business, Tyler, baby. Get the laptop. I am transferring the funds right now." She ran to the kitchen, grabbing her laptop, oblivious to the fact that the piece of paper she had just signed didn't give her access to the bank. It gave the bank access to her. Blackwood packed up his bag, snapping the latches shut. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, he winked. I struggled to my feet, leaning on the arm of the sofa. "I am going to go now, honey," I said, my voice quiet in the room filled with their celebration. "I am very tired." Brittany didn't look up from her laptop screen. She was frowning, typing furiously, trying to log into my account. Of course, Dad, whatever, thanks for signing on. She didn't offer to walk me out. She didn't say I love you. She didn't even say thank you. She was already on to the next thing, consuming the next resource. I walked to the door, Blackwood opening it for me. Have a nice day, Mr. Hallington. Blackwood called out to Tyler. Tyler raised his champagne glass without looking at us. Keep the change, buddy. We walked out into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind us, cutting off the sound of Brittany cursing at her computer screen because the password still wouldn't work. Blackwood straightened his posture, the slump disappearing, the confident shark returning. He adjusted his glasses and handed me a copy of the document she had just signed. She didn't even read the title, he said, shaking his head. She signed her life away for a wedding reception. She signed it for greed, I said, taking the paper, folding it, and placing it in my pocket. Did you see her face? Blackwood asked. She thinks she won. I walked toward the elevator, pressing the button. The numbers lit up, counting down. She thinks she bought a kingdom, I said, stepping into the car, but she just signed a lease on a prison cell. The doors closed and we began our descent. Phase 1 was complete. The liability was hers, the debt was hers. Now all that was left was to let her throw the party that would end her social life. See you at the wedding, Marcus, I said, as we reached the lobby. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Garrison. I walked out into the Seattle gray, feeling a strange lightness in my step. The old man act was exhausting, but the payoff was going to be worth every second of back pain. I had one more stop to make. The Hallingtons were in town, and I had a house to give away. The gravel of my driveway crunched under the tires of a rented Bentley as the Hallingtons arrived. They parked diagonally, taking up 2 spaces, as if the geometry of the world had to bend to accommodate their arrival. I watched from the front window, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, feeling the vibration of their invasion before they even stepped out of the car. Richard and Victoria Hallington Tyler's parents emerged like royalty visiting a leper colony. Richard wore a ascot, which I didn't think anyone actually wore outside of period dramas, and Victoria was draped in furs, despite the mild Seattle weather. They looked around my modest neighborhood, with noses wrinkled so high they could probably smell the rain. Clouds gathering above Brittany and Tyler were with them, of course, trailing behind, like eager puppies waiting for scraps. Brittany looked nervous, her eyes darting between the luxury car and my peeling front porch. Paint, Tyler just looked smug, strutting up the walk as if he were already measuring the lot for home redevelopment. I opened the door before they could knock, forcing a smile onto my face that felt like cracked plaster. Welcome, I said, stepping back to let them in. Come in, please, Victoria breezed past me, not making eye contact, clutching her purse tight to her side as if she expected cockroaches to jump out of the drywall. Oh, Garrison, she sighed, looking around my living room. It is certainly quaint, isn't it, Richard? Very rustic, Richard nodded, touching a wall with one finger, then wiping it on his handkerchief. It has a certain charm, I suppose, in a fixer-upper sort of way. They sat on my sofa without being asked, perching on the edge of the cushions, as if relaxing might contaminate them. Brittany and Tyler stood behind them, a united front of greed, so Garrison. Richard started getting straight to the point. Tyler tells us there was a bit of a hiccup with the financing for the wedding. A technical glitch, I believe. I sat in my armchair, the springs creaking under my weight. I kept my posture slumped, my hands clasping my knees. Yes, I said, my voice raspy. It was a terrible confusion. The bank locked everything up, but Brittany fixed it. She is a lifesaver. Victoria smiled, a thin stretching of lips over teeth. Of course she is. She is a Hallington now, or she will be soon. And Hallingtons solve problems. She looked around the room again, her gaze landing on the family photos on the mantel. Photos of me and Catherine building this life brick by brick. We are here because we are concerned, Garrison, Victoria continued. We are concerned about the children as future. Tyler is used to a certain standard of living, you understand. And frankly, their current apartment, while lovely as a rental renting, is so common, don't you think? It is throwing money away? I nodded slowly, staring at the floor. You are right. It is hard to get ahead when you are paying rent, exactly. Richard boomed, slapping his knee. That is why we have a proposition, a tradition, really. In the Hallington family, the bride's father provides the marital home. It ensures the couple starts on solid footing. Equity-wise, I looked up, feigning confusion. The marital home. You mean you want me to help them buy a house? Richard laughed, a condescending bark. No, Garrison. We want you to give them a house, specifically, this house. The air left the room. I looked at Brittany. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor, picking at her fingernails. She knew she had told them to ask. This house, I repeated, looking around at the walls I had painted, the floors I had refinished. But where would I live? Richard waved a hand dismissively. Oh, surely you can find something smaller, something more appropriate for a single man of your advanced years, a condo perhaps, or an assisted living facility. Tyler mentioned you have been having some memory issues. It might be safer. The cruelty was breathtaking. They weren't just asking for a gift. They were asking for my displacement. They wanted to kick me out of the home my wife died in so their unemployed son could play landlord. I looked at Tyler. He was smirking, visualizing himself in my chair, drinking my whiskey. I don't know, I said, my voice trembling effectively. I have lived here for 30 years. It is all I have, Dad. Brittany spoke up, her voice sharp. Please do not be selfish. You barely use the upstairs. Anyway, we need the space. Tyler needs a home office for his venture capital firm. And we want to start a family. You want grandchildren, don't you? You want them to have a backyard. Emotional blackmail, the last refuge of the scoundrel. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders sag, letting the defeat wash over me outwardly, while inwardly the fire of my resolve burned hotter than ever. You are right, I said quietly. I am just an old man holding on to the past. You kids deserve a start. You deserve a legacy. Victoria clapped her hands delightedly. Oh, Garrison, that is so sensible of you. We knew you would see reason, but I continued, raising a finger. I cannot give you this house, not yet. The title is tied up in the trust. It would take months to unravel the legalities. The disappointment in the room was palpable. Tyler's face fell. However, I said, standing up and walking over to my desk, I do have something else. Something I have been saving for a special occasion. I opened the top drawer and reached into the back, pulling out a heavy iron key. It was old, rusted in spots, and attached to a brass tag that simply read, "The cottage years ago," I said. Turning back to them, keeping my eyes lowered, I bought a property on the outskirts of the city. It is historic, a standalone home on a large lot. I bought it as an investment, thinking maybe one day it would be worth something. I paid it off years ago. There is no mortgage, it is free and clear. Tyler's eyes widened. Historic, large lot, free and clear. He was practically drooling. Dad. Brittany breathed. You never told me about a second house. I wanted it to be a surprise. I lied smoothly. It needs a little love. It has been empty for a while, but it has good bones, real character, and it is yours, if you want it. Richard stood up, walking over to inspect the key. You have the deed. I have the deed right here, I said, pulling a document from the drawer. It was the deed to the property at 429 Industrial Way. It was a real deed to a real property I owned. But I didn't hand it to them. I just showed them the cover sheet. I can sign it over to you today, I said. It can be your wedding gift, a debt-free home to start your life. Victoria looked at Richard. Richard looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at Brittany. It was a silent conversation of greed, calculating the value. Well, Richard huffed, adjusting his ascot, that is certainly acceptable. A historic renovation project could be quite chic. Tyler has a good eye for design. We will take it, Tyler said, stepping forward and snatching the key from my hand. Thank you, Garrison. It is the least you could do, really, considering the stress you caused with the bank. I forced a smile watching my son-in-law pocket the key to a property. Had never seen a property he assumed was a hidden gem. You are welcome, son, I said. It is a unique place. I think you will find it very educational. Brittany hugged me a stiff, awkward embrace. Thanks, Dad. I knew you had money hidden away somewhere. I knew you were holding out on us. I patted her back, feeling the expensive fabric of her blouse, thinking about the eviction notice that was currently sitting in Blackwood's outbox. I just want you to be happy, I said. I want you to have the life you deserve. We will, Victoria said, standing up and smoothing her furs. Now that is settled, we really must be going. We have a dinner reservation at the Metropolitan Garrison. You should get some rest. You look terrible. I walked them to the door, watching them pile back into the Bentley, feeling the weight of their judgment lift as they drove away. They had the key. They thought they had won the lottery. They thought they had bullied a senile old man into giving them a historic estate. I closed the door and locked it, leaning my forehead against the cool wood and letting out a laugh that had been building in my chest for 20 minutes. The property at 429 Industrial Way was historic, all right. It was a condemned, foreclosed shack sitting next to a rendering plant in the industrial district. I had bought it for the land value, intending to bulldoze it for a warehouse project that never got off the ground. It had no electricity, no running water, and the roof had caved in 3 years ago. It was a rat-infested health hazard, and it was now the marital home of Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Hallington. I walked back to my desk and picked up the phone, dialing Blackwood. They took the bait. Marcus, I said. They took the key. Did they ask to see the inspection report? Blackwood asked, his voice dry. They didn't even ask for the address, I said. They just heard free house and lost their minds. Good. Blackwood said, I will file the title transfer first thing in the morning. By the time they say I do, they will be the proud owners of the city. It's the biggest code violation. I hung up the phone and looked around my living room, my quiet, clean, paid-off living room. They had wanted to take this from me. They had wanted to put me in a home and take everything I had built. Instead, I had given them exactly what they asked for, a house, a future, and a very hard lesson in reading the fine print. The wedding was in 24 hours. The clock was ticking, and the bomb was set. Friday morning arrived with a suffocating gray sky that hung low over Seattle, mirroring the tension that was vibrating through my phone before I even touched it. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking black coffee and looking at the empty space on the wall where a family portrait used to hang. I had taken it down the night before, putting it in a box marked storage. It felt like removing a bandage from a wound that had refused to heal for years. My phone buzzed, dancing across the wooden table. It was Brittany calling for the 4th time in 10 minutes. I let it ring for a moment, taking a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness before answering. Dad. She screamed the moment the connection opened. Where is the money? Elena from the Glass Chateau just called me, she said. The wire transfer never arrived, she said. If they do not have the full balance by noon today, they are locking the doors and turning away the vendors. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes against the shrill panic in her voice. It was the sound of a spoiled child who had never been told no, realizing for the first time that the world didn't run on her schedule. Calm down, Brittany, I said, my voice raspy and slow, playing the part of the overwhelmed old man. I went to the bank yesterday. Honey, I told you that? The man said it was processed. Well, it wasn't processed, she shrieked. I have the florist in the other room threatening to take the centerpieces back. I have the band asking for their final deposit. Dad, this is a disaster. The mayor's wife is coming tonight. Do you understand that we have influencers flying in from LA? If this wedding gets canceled, I am ruined. I listened to her list, the people she was trying to impress. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about starting a life with Tyler. It was about the audience. It was a production, and I was just the producer who was failing to secure the budget. I told you, I am not good with this digital stuff, I said, letting a note of frustration creep into my voice. I saw the man type it into the computer. Maybe he made a mistake with the numbers, I don't know. You have to fix it, she yelled. Fix it now. Go back to the bank. I cannot go back to the bank, Brittany, I said. My truck is in the shop, I lied smoothly, staring out the window at my Ford F-150, sitting perfectly operational in the driveway. The transmission is acting up again. There was a silence on the line, a heavy pause where I could practically hear her calculating her options, realizing she was cornered. Then, what are we going to do? She asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Tyler is freaking out, Dad. He says if this falls apart, he is going to look like an idiot in front of his investors. His investors? I almost laughed. The only thing Tyler invested in was his own ego. Listen, I said, sighing heavily, as if the weight of the world were on my shoulders. I have a solution. I anticipated something might go wrong with those computers. I never trusted them. So I had the bank cut a cashier check. A check? Brittany asked, hope creeping back into her tone. A physical check, yes, I said. A certified cashier, check for the full amount. $150,000. It is right here in my pocket. Oh, thank God, she breathed. Bring it here, bring it to the venue right now. Elena is in her office. She is holding the contract. I can't bring it now, honey, I said. I told you the truck is dead, and the buses don't run out to your fancy venue until the afternoon. Then take an Uber, call a taxi. I don't care, just get here. No, I said firmly. My voice hardening just enough to sound stubborn, but not suspicious. I am not trusting a taxi driver with a check this size. I am not going to lose my life savings in the back of some stranger's car. I will bring it with me when I come for the wedding. But the wedding isn't until tomorrow, she argued. The rehearsal dinner is tonight. They need the money now. Tell Elena I am good for it, I said. Tell her Garrison Ford gave his word. Tell her I will walk into that venue tomorrow at 5:00 sharp, 1 hour before the ceremony, and I will hand her the check personally. Dad, that is cutting it too close, she whined. It is the best I can do, Brittany, I said. I am an old man doing the best I can. If that is not good enough, then maybe you should find another way to pay for it. There was a muffled sound on the other end, like she was covering the phone. I heard Tyler Essett's voice in the background, muffled and angry. Then Brittany came back on. Fine, she snapped. Fine. I will tell Elena you are bringing it tomorrow. But you better be there, Dad. Do not be late, and do not wear that flannel shirt. Wear the suit we bought you. The gray one that hides your stomach. I looked down at my flat stomach, hardened by years of lifting steel beams. I will be there, Brittany, I promised. I will be there with bells on and the check. Just bring the money, Dad. That is all we need. We have everything else under control. We just need you to do this one thing right. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down on the table. The silence rushed back into the room. But it wasn't lonely anymore. It was electric. I stood up and walked to the refrigerator, opening it to grab a bottle of water. Taped to the door was the invitation to the wedding. Heavy cardstock, embossed gold lettering. The wedding of Brittany Ford and Tyler Hallington. At the Glass Chateau. It looked expensive. It looked perfect. It was a lie printed on paper. I had lied to her. Of course, there was no cashier check. I had withdrawn a check yesterday. Yes, just to have the prop. But I had shredded it the moment I got home. The only thing in my pocket was a folded piece of paper with my speech on it. I imagined the scene at the venue right now. Brittany spinning lies to the manager, promising that her wealthy eccentric father was on his way, telling the VIPs that everything was fine. Tyler strutting around, pretending he wasn't terrified, pouring drinks he hadn't paid for. They were digging their hole deeper and deeper, inviting more people, raising the stakes higher, believing that the safety net was still there. They trusted my weakness, they trusted my love. They didn't realize that love without respect is just exploitation, and I was done being exploited. My phone buzzed again. A text from Tyler. Hey Garrison, Britt says you are bringing the check tomorrow. Cool, just make sure it is a bank check, not personal. Elena is being a bitch about it. Also, we need to talk about the landscaping at the new house. It is a mess. And I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He hadn't even stepped foot in the property. Had given him the rundown shack in the industrial district, and he was already complaining about the landscaping. He assumed I had given him a palace. He assumed the world owed him a manicured lawn. I typed a reply, my fingers moving slowly. I will handle everything tomorrow, Tyler. Just focus on the wedding. I hit send. I walked into my bedroom where the Tom Ford tuxedo was hanging on the door. It was sleek, black, elegant. It was the armor of a man who was going to war. I ran my hand over the lapel. Tomorrow. I wouldn't be the confused old man with the broken truck. Tomorrow, I would be Garrison Ford, CEO. The pressure was on them now. The clock was ticking down. Each hour that passed was another hour. They spent money they didn't have, making promises they couldn't keep. They were building a tower of cards, and I was the wind waiting to blow. I checked my watch. 24 hours until showtime. I decided to spend the afternoon at the driving range hitting golf balls with a violence that startled the other patrons. I needed to burn off the energy. I needed to be calm when I walked into that glass castle. Because when I handed them the bill instead of the check, I wanted my hand to be perfectly steady. The gravel crunching under the tires of the Rolls-Royce Phantom sounded different than it did under my Ford pickup. It sounded expensive. It sounded like money arriving. The glass chateau rose up in front of us, a monstrosity of steel and floor-to-ceiling windows perched on a cliff overlooking the Sound. It was designed to catch the light, and right now it was glowing with the golden hour sun, looking exactly like the fairy tale castle my daughter had demanded. I sat in the back seat of the hired car, watching the scene unfold through tint darker than a midnight sky. Beside me, Marcus Blackwood adjusted his cufflinks. He wasn't holding a briefcase today. He was holding a leather portfolio, thin and lethal. No, ready, Garrison. Blackwood asked, his voice low. I looked down at my hands. They were scrubbed, clean nails manicured for the first time in 20 years. The calluses were still there, hidden under the cuff of a white Egyptian cotton shirt, but the grease was gone. I touched the silk lapel of the bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. It fit like a second skin armor plated in wool and spite. I have been ready for 3 days, I said. The car glided to a stop at the valet stand. The venue was swarming with people. Valets in white jackets were running back and forth, parking Porsches and Mercedes. Guests were lingering on the front steps, holding champagne flutes, trying to find the best lighting for their selfies. It was a sea of pastel dresses and rented suits, a carnival of vanity. The driver walked around and opened my door. I stepped out. First, the shoes hit the pavement, black patent leather shining like obsidian, then the trousers perfectly hemmed, breaking just right. Then the jacket buttoned once, showing the flat stomach of a man who worked for a living. I stood up to my full height, buttoning the jacket, giving the cuffs a sharp tug. The air smelled of sea salt and expensive perfume. I took a breath and let the old Garrison, the quiet, invisible father, fade away. In his place stood Garrison Ford, the man who built bridges and crushed competitors. The valet, a young kid who looked overwhelmed, stared at me. He didn't ask for a ticket. He didn't ask if I was lost. He just straightened his posture, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure that comes with real power. Good evening, sir, the valet said. Keep it close, I said, handing him $100 bill. My voice was gravel and steel. I won't be staying long. I walked up the wide stone steps, Blackwood flanking me like a shadow. The conversation on the patio died down, a rippling silence that spread outward from where I walked. People turned expecting to see a celebrity or a senator. Instead, they saw the man they had been told was a sewer rat. I saw the confusion on their faces. They knew. Brittany's father was supposed to be a blue-collar embarrassment, a stain on the aesthetic. They were looking for flannel and work boots. They didn't know what to make of the silver-haired lion in the $6,000 suit, walking with the stride of a man who owned the pavement beneath his feet. Near the entrance, I saw Richard and Victoria Hallington holding court with a group of investors they were trying to impress. Richard was wearing that ridiculous ascot. Again holding a cigar, he clearly didn't know how to smoke. He saw me, and his jaw actually dropped. The cigar wobbled in his fingers. "Garrison," he sputtered, stepping forward, blocking my path. "Is that you?" I stopped, looking down at him from the steps. Richard was a tall man, but in that moment he looked small, shrunken by his own pretension. "Hello, Richard," I said. My tone was pleasant, but cold, the way you talk to an employee you are about to fire. "Nice turnout." Victoria peered at me over her sunglasses, her eyes raking over the tuxedo, checking the fit, checking the fabric, trying to find a flaw, trying to find the fraud. But she couldn't. It was real, and she knew it, my God. "Garrison," she whispered. You look presentable." I didn't thank her. I didn't smile. "I cleaned up nice, Victoria," I said, stepping around them. I didn't want to ruin the aesthetic. I kept walking. The heavy glass doors of the venue swung open automatically, welcoming me into the belly of the beast. Inside, the air conditioning was freezing, the scent of lilies overpowering. It was a beautiful cage. I saw the venue coordinator, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, pacing frantically near the ballroom doors. She looked like she was about to scream. I adjusted my cufflinks one last time. "It is showtime, Marcus," I said. Blackwood nodded, clutching the portfolio. "Let's go break some hearts," he said. We walked into the lobby, the sound of our shoes echoing on the marble floor, marking the countdown to the end of the world. The lobby of the glass chateau was a cathedral of acoustically perfect surfaces, which meant the silence that fell when the venue manager stepped forward was absolute. Elena, the manager, stood in front of the double mahogany doors to the ballroom, her arms crossed over her chest like a bouncer at a nightclub guarding the gates of heaven. She wasn't smiling. She held a clipboard in one hand and a credit card terminal in the other, and she looked ready to use both as weapons. Brittany and Tyler were leading a pack of VIPs toward the doors, laughing too loudly, their voices tight with the manic energy of people trying to outrun an avalanche. When they saw the closed doors and Elena's stone face, they faltered. "Elena," Brittany chirped, her smile wobbling. "Why are the doors closed? The guests need to be seated for the first course. The governor is waiting." "Mrs. Hallington," Elena said, her voice echoing off the marble floors. "The doors are closed because the account is unsettled. The wire transfer never arrived. The grace period expired at noon." Brittany laughed, a jagged sound that sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, don't be silly. My father is bringing the check. He is probably just parking. He is old, you know. He moves slow. He is not parking," Elena said. "We checked. The valet has not seen him. We need $150,000. Mrs. Hallington, right now, or the doors stay locked and the kitchen stops cooking." Panic, real and raw, flashed across Brittany's face. She spun around, her eyes scanning the lobby, frantically searching for a flannel shirt, searching for the safety net she had abused for 26 years. Then she saw me. She didn't recognize me at first. She looked past the tuxedo, past the polished shoes, searching for the blue-collar worker she was ashamed of. But then our eyes met, and recognition hit her like a physical blow. She screamed, hiking up her $12,000 dress and sprinting across the lobby, her heels clacking violently on the stone. Tyler trailed behind her, looking pale and sweaty. She skidded to a halt in front of me, breathless and wild-eyed. "Oh my God," she gasped, clutching my arm. "Oh, you are here and you are dressed. Thank God, where is it?" "Give it to me," she held out her hand, palm up, expectant, demanding. It was a gesture I had seen 1,000 times before. The hand that took and never gave. "Give you what, Brittany?" I asked, my voice calm and level. "The check," she hissed, looking over her shoulder at Elena, who was watching with narrowed eyes. "The cashier check." "Give it to me so I can shut her up and get these people seated. You are cutting it way too close, Dad." I looked at her hand. I looked at her face distorted by greed and entitlement, and I felt nothing, not pity, not love, just a cold, hollow resolve. "I don't have the check, Brittany," I said. She froze. Her hand stayed in the air, trembling slightly. "What, I don't have it?" I repeated loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I never went to the bank. I never got a cashier check." Brittany's face crumpled, the blood draining away, leaving her makeup looking like a mask on a corpse. You are lying. You said you had it. You promised." "I lied," I said simply. "Just like you lied about the cost of the flowers. Just like you lied about Tyler's job. Just like you lied about wanting me here." Tyler stepped forward, trying to puff out his chest, trying to salvage the situation. "Listen. Garrison, this isn't funny. We have important people here. You need to pay the woman. Stop playing games." I turned my gaze to him, cool and detached. "I am not playing games, Tyler. And I am not paying the woman. I didn't sign the contract." Elena stepped forward, sensing the disaster unfolding. "Mr. Ford," she said, her voice sharp, "are you refusing to provide payment for the event?" I looked at the manager. "I am refusing," I said. "I am a guest here." "Elena, I am not the host. The host is the woman standing right there." I pointed at Brittany. "But you pay for everything." Brittany shrieked, her voice rising to a hysteria that silenced the entire lobby. "You always pay. That is your job. You are my father." "Not anymore," I said quietly. "You fired me. Remember, you said my life was worthless. You said I shouldn't show up." "But I didn't mean it like that," she wailed, grabbing my lapels, shaking me. "You can't do this to me, Dad." "Not today. Everyone is watching." I removed her hands from my suit gently, but firmly. "I know they are watching, Brittany," I said. "That is the point. You wanted a spectacle. You wanted to show everyone how rich and successful you are. Well, go ahead. Show them. Pay the bill." "I can't," she sobbed, collapsing slightly, her knees buckling under the weight of the reality crashing down on her. "I don't have the money, you know. I don't have the money." "Then I guess you don't have a wedding," I said. The crowd gasped, phones were raised, capturing the moment. The humiliation she had feared, the embarrassment she had tried to avoid, by hiding me away, was now happening because of her own actions, and I was just standing there watching it burn. The weeping of the bride was the only sound in the cavernous atrium, a jagged sobbing noise that bounced off the glass walls and marble floors, like a bird trapped in a cathedral. The guests were frozen, a sea of expensive fabrics and confused faces staring at the tableau of a family. Disintegrating in real time, Elena. The manager stood with her arms crossed, guarding the doors to the banquet hall like a sentry at the gates of paradise, denying entry to the damned. I looked at Brittany, crumbled on the floor, her silk dress pooling around her like spilled milk. I looked at Tyler, pale and sweating, his hands twitching at his sides, useless, and I realized this was not enough. The lesson had to be absolute. It had to be public. It had to be etched into the memory of every person in this room so that the truth could never be rewritten by their lies. I stepped past my weeping daughter. My polished shoes clicked rhythmically on the stone, a steady metronome of judgment. I walked toward the small raised platform near the entrance where a string quartet had been playing softly until the chaos erupted. The musicians lowered their bows, watching me. Approach with wide eyes, I reached out and took the microphone from the stand. The feedback whined a high-pitched screech that made the crowd flinch. I tapped the mesh once, a thudding sound that echoed through the silent lobby like a gavel striking a bench. "Can I have your attention, please?" I said. My voice was calm, deep, and amplified. It filled the space, reaching the back corners where the Hallingtons were trying to shrink into the shadows. The room turned to me. 300 faces watched the man in the $6,000 tuxedo. The man, they had been told, was a senile embarrassment. "My name is Garrison Ford," I said, looking directly at the camera of a videographer who was too stunned to stop recording. "For those of you who do not know me, I am the father of the bride. For those of you who do know me or think you know me based on what you have been told, I am the sewer rat." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Brittany looked up, her mascara-streaked face twisted in horror. "Yes," I continued, walking to the edge of the platform, letting my gaze sweep over the investors, the influencers, the society climbers. "My daughter told me recently that my life was nothing to be proud of. She sat across from me in a restaurant I paid for and told me that the work I did, the concrete I poured, the bridges I built, made me unworthy of sitting at this table. She told me I was an embarrassment. She told me my life was worthless." I paused, letting the word hang in the air, heavy and toxic. "Worthless." I looked down at Brittany. She was shaking her head, mouthing the word, "Stop," but no sound came out. She wanted my money. I said, my voice hardening, dropping to a register that commanded absolute silence. She wanted the fruit of 40 years of labor, but she despised the tree it grew on. She wanted the check, but she did not want the father. She wanted me to be invisible, a ghost transaction in her bank account. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket. For a second, Tyler looked hopeful, thinking I was reaching for the checkbook, thinking I was about to save them. Instead, I pulled out the crumpled napkin from the restaurant, the one where I had written down the insults she had hurled at me. "I am a simple man," I said, folding the napkin. "I believe in fair exchange. I believe you get what you pay for. And I believe that if you call something worthless, you should not be surprised when it stops producing value." I took a step down from the platform, walking toward the crowd, parting them like the Red Sea. They moved aside, terrified and fascinated, unable to look away from the train wreck. "So I am here today to grant my daughter her wish," I said, stopping in front of the Hallingtons, who looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. "She asked for a life without my interference. She asked for independence. She said my life had no value." I turned back to Brittany, pointing a finger at her. "So, I am validating your assessment. Brittany, from this moment forward, the value of my life in your bank account is exactly zero." The gasp from the room was audible, sucking the oxygen out of the air. "Zero," I repeated, my voice booming. $0 for the venue. $0 for the dress. $0 for the apartment you live in. And $0 for the husband who refuses to get a zot. Tyler lunged forward, finally finding his voice. "Hey, you cannot say that." I turned on him, and the look in my eyes stopped him dead in his tracks. "I can say it because I bought it, Tyler," I said. "I bought the car you drove here. I bought the suit on your back. I bought the ring on her finger. And as of yesterday, I own the debt you racked up trying to pretend you were a king." I looked back at the crowd, addressing the guests, the witnesses to this execution. "There will be no reception tonight," I said clearly. "There will be no dinner. The doors are locked because the bill is unpaid, and I am not paying it." I gestured to the open doors of the venue, the exit leading out into the parking lot. "However," I continued, "I did make a donation. The $200,000 that was allocated for this party has been transferred to the Garrison Ford Scholarship Fund. It will go to students who know that respect is earned, not inherited." students who are not afraid to get their hands dirty. I looked at Brittany one last time. She was not crying anymore. She was staring at me with a look of total devastation, the look of someone who realizes too late that they burned down their own shelter. "You wanted a wedding, Brittany," I said softly, dropping the microphone to my side. "You got a reality check instead." "Happy wedding day." The microphone hit the floor with a deafening thud. I turned my back on them, on the tears, on the pleading, on the ruins of their vanity, and walked toward the exit. Blackwood fell in step beside me, handing out papers to the guests as we passed, distributing the truth in black and white. I walked out into the cool evening air, leaving the chaos behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The silence inside the glass castle was the loudest applause I had ever heard. As I walked away from the microphone, the silence behind me began to fracture, replaced by the sharp rustle of paper. Marcus Blackwood moved through the stunned crowd, with the efficiency of a man distributing programs at a funeral, which in a way he wasn't alone. Two of his paralegals had materialized from the shadows, carrying trays of thick, cream-colored envelopes, sealed with the Ford family crest. They moved from table to table, placing an envelope at every seat right next to the empty chargers and the crystal glasses that would remain dry. The guests, confused and desperate for any distraction from the awkwardness, reached for them, assuming they were menus or perhaps an explanation for the delay. They were not menus. I stopped near the exit, turning back to watch the fallout. It rippled through the room like a wave crashing against a shore. First, there was the sound of envelopes being torn open. Then a moment of quiet reading, followed immediately by gasps, whispers, and the sudden bright glare of cell phone screens being raised. Blackwood walked directly to the Hallingtons. Richard and Victoria were huddled together, looking like shipwreck survivors on a life raft. Blackwood placed a thicker dossier directly into Richard's trembling hands. "Compliments of Mr. Ford," Blackwood said, his voice carrying over the rising murmur. "We thought you might want to see the due diligence report on your son's venture capital firm." Richard opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page and all the color drained from his face. Beneath his fake tan, he was looking at the forensic accounting of Tyler's life. The gambling debts totaling $40,000 paid from my bank account. The non-existent business license. The credit score that was lower than the temperature in the room. Victoria leaned over, reading over his shoulder. She let out a strangled cry, clutching her pearls for real. This time she looked at Tyler, who was standing a few feet away, trying to text someone, probably his bookie, with a look of absolute betrayal. "You lied to us," she shrieked, her voice cutting through the lobby. "You said you were managing a hedge fund. You are unemployed." Tyler flinched, looking around wildly as the investors he had been trying to schmooze began to back away, checking their own wallets. At the influencer table, Brittany's friends were not offering her comfort. They were reading the itemized list of Brittany's spending on the supplementary card, the $85,000 in clothes trips and spa treatments, all paid for by the father she had just disowned. They were taking photos of the documents, live streaming the evidence of her fraud to the very followers she had tried so hard to impress with her fake wealth. Brittany saw them. She saw the phones pointed at her, not capturing her beauty, but capturing her bankruptcy. "Stop it!" she screamed, rushing toward the nearest table, trying to snatch the papers away. "Do not look at that. It is private." It is lies, but there were too many papers. There were too many guests. The truth was out, circulating in the room like a virus. Then came the final blow. Blackwood signaled to the projectionist who had been hired to show a slideshow of the couple's love story. Instead, a new image flashed onto the massive screen behind the stage. It was a receipt, a digital copy of a wire transfer time stamped yesterday afternoon, amount $200, $1,000, recipient. The Catherine Ford Scholarship Fund for Civil Engineering memo, in honor of a life of hard work. The crowd stared at the screen. The money that was supposed to pay for the lobster and the champagne, the money that was supposed to validate Brittany's existence, was gone. It wasn't in a trust, it wasn't in a frozen account. It had been given away to strangers who would appreciate it. I saw Brittany look up at the screen, her knees finally gave out. She collapsed onto the marble floor, surrounded by the debris of her lies, sobbing not for the loss of her father, but for the loss of the money. She realized in that moment that it wasn't a bluff, the well was truly dry. Tyler tried to go to her, but Richard Hallington stepped in front of his son, his face purple with rage. "Do not touch her," Richard spat at his own son. "You are a fraud. You have humiliated this family. You are cut off. Do you hear me? Cut off." I watched them turn on each other, the rats fighting on the sinking ship. The humiliation was total, absolute, and public. The air in the room was thick with it, a heavy, suffocating blanket of shame that settled over the bride and groom. I caught Blackwood's eye across the room. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The job was done. The evidence was delivered. The verdict was guilty. I turned and pushed open the heavy glass doors, stepping out into the cool night air. The sound of Brittany's wailing faded as the doors swung shut behind me, sealing the disaster inside. The parking lot was quiet. The only sound, the distant siren of a police car getting closer, coming to answer the call the venue manager had surely made. I walked to the waiting car, not as a father who had lost a daughter, but as a man who had finally stopped paying for a stranger's mistakes. The blue lights of the police cruisers cut through the darkness of the parking lot, flashing against the glass walls of the venue like a strobe light on a crime scene, which effectively it was. Elena had wasted no time. As soon as I walked out, she made the call. Theft of services fraud and breach of contract. I watched from the back of the Rolls-Royce as two officers walked briskly into the lobby, their hands resting on their belts, ready to restore order to the chaos. Inside the scene was a masterpiece of consequences. Brittany was screaming at the officers, pointing a shaking finger at the empty doorway where I had been, he promised. She wailed, "He said he would pay. Arrest him. Go get him." One of the officers, a veteran with a tired face, asked for identification. Then he asked for the contract. Elena produced it, slapping it onto the registration desk alongside the credit card authorization form that had been declined. "Ms. Ford," the officer said, looking at the paperwork. "You signed this contract. You authorized the services. The venue provided them. You consumed them. You are liable." "But my father..." Brittany sobbed. "He is supposed to pay. He always pays." Elena stepped forward, handing the officer another document. It was a copy of the notarized agreement Blackwood had tricked her into signing just days ago, the binding assumption of debt liability. "Actually," Officer Elena said, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "we have this notarized yesterday." Ms. Ford explicitly assumed full financial responsibility for all wedding-related expenses, indemnifying Mr. Ford against all claims. She signed it right here. The officer looked at the paper, then at Brittany. "Is this your signature?" Brittany stared at the document, her eyes widening as she recognized the paper she had signed so eagerly, the paper she thought was her ticket to the bank vault. She realized then that she hadn't signed a power of attorney, she had signed her own confession. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Then you are under arrest for theft of services and fraud," the officer said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Tyler tried to back away, inching toward the door, hoping to slip out unnoticed, but Richard Hallington grabbed him by the arm, holding him fast. "No, you don't," Richard growled. "You are not leaving. You are going to stay here and face this. You dragged us into this mess." I watched as the officer turned Brittany around and clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. The sound was faint through the glass, but I felt it in my bones. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was limp, broken, dragged out of her fairy tale castle in shackles, her $12,000 dress dragging on the dirty floor. 3 days later, the reality of their new life set in fast. They had been bailed out by Tyler's parents on the condition that they disappear. The Hallingtons wanted nothing to do with them, Richard had made it clear. You are cut off, disowned, and you are never to use our name again. They had no apartment. My eviction notice had been served, and the locks were changed. They had no car. The repo man had taken the Porsche during the reception, a detail Blackwood had executed with military precision. They had no money. Their accounts were frozen or empty. They had one thing left. The key, the heavy iron key to the historic property I had gifted them, 129 Industrial Way. They took a bus to the address, lugging their few remaining suitcases behind them, wearing clothes that were already starting to look wrinkled and sad. I imagine the conversation was hopeful at first. Tyler probably convincing her that it was a diamond in the rough, a vintage estate they could flip for millions. But as the bus moved further away from the city center and deeper into the industrial district, the hope must have started to curdle. The landscape changed from glass towers to warehouses, from coffee shops to smelting plants. The air grew thick with the smell of exhaust and chemicals. The bus driver let them off on a cracked sidewalk bordered by a chain link fence. This cannot be it, Brittany said, checking the GPS on her phone. It says we are here. They walked down the street, the gravel crunching under their designer sneakers, passing abandoned lots and rusted machinery. And then they saw it. 29. Industrial Way. It wasn't a cottage, it wasn't a historic estate, it was a shack, a wooden structure that looked like it had been exhaled by the factory next door. The paint was peeling in long gray strips. The porch sagged like a broken jaw. The windows were boarded up with plywood that had graffiti spray painted on it. Tyler stopped staring at the house with his mouth open. "This is a joke," he muttered. "He has to be joking." Brittany walked up the overgrown path, stepping over trash and weeds. She reached the front door, the wood rotting around the frame. Her hand trembled as she pulled the iron key from her pocket. She slid it into the lock. It turned with a rusty click. The door creaked open, revealing the interior. It smelled of mold, damp earth, and rats. There was no furniture, just a single mattress I had left in the center of the room, stained and old. There was no electricity. The only light came from the gaps in the boarded windows. On the mattress sat a single envelope. Brittany walked over and picked it up, tearing it open. Inside was a note written in my handwriting. "You wanted a house, you wanted independence, you wanted me out of your life. Here it is. No mortgage, no rent, no parents, just you and your work ethic. Welcome home." She dropped the note and looked around the squalor. This was their inheritance. This was their marital home. It was exactly what they could afford. It was exactly what they deserved, and Tyler walked in, kicking a piece of debris across the floor. "We can't live here, Britt. We can't. Then get a job," Brittany snapped, her voice echoing in the empty shack. "Get a job, Tyler, or we starve." The wind off the coast of Alaska was cold, clean, and biting. It smelled of salt and freedom. I stood on the deck of the vessel, wrapping my hands around a mug of hot coffee, watching the glaciers drift by in the distance. The silence out here was different. It wasn't the silence of an empty house or a lonely dinner table. It was the silence of peace. My phone sat on the table next to me. It had been silent for days, but as we came within range of a cell tower, it buzzed once. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. I picked it up. "Dad." Brittany's voice was small, broken, striped of all the arrogance and entitlement. It sounded like the voice of the little girl who used to scrape her knee and come running for a bandage. "Dad, please, we are at the house. It is awful. There is no heat. There are rats. Tyler left this morning. He said he couldn't take it. I am alone, Dad. I have nothing. Please, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Just help me one last time." I listened to her sobbing. I listened to the sound of my daughter hitting rock bottom, and I felt a pang of sadness, a ghost of the father I used to be. But then I remembered the forgery. I remembered the insults. I remembered the look on her face when she told me I was worthless. Brittany, I said, my voice steady, carrying over the sound of the wind. You have a roof over your head, you have your health, and for the first time in your life you have a clean slate. But I can't do this, she cried. I don't know how to survive like this. Then you will learn, I said simply. My father learned, I learned, and now it is your turn. It is the most valuable gift I can give you, Dad. Please, she begged. I am not your banker, Brittany. I said, I am just a sewer rat, remember? I hung up the phone. I picked up the device, looking at it for a moment, the black screen reflecting the gray sky. Then I walked to the railing of the boat. I tossed the phone over the side. It hit the water with a small splash and disappeared beneath the waves, sinking down into the dark, freezing depths, taking the last connection to my old life with it. I turned back to the horizon, taking a deep breath of the glacial air. I was 71 years old, I had $18 million in the bank, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't have to build anything for anyone else. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted perfect. I was finally free. The most painful lesson I learned wasn't about money, but about the difference between enabling and loving. Brittany mistook my humility for weakness and treated my generosity as an entitlement rather than a privilege. She built her entire identity on a foundation of debt and disdain, believing that her worth came from what she could buy, not who she was. By cutting her off, I didn't destroy her life. I gave her the only opportunity she ever had to build a real one. True wealth isn't about the balance in your bank account. It's about having the integrity to earn your way and the character to respect those who helped you get there. If you believe that respect is earned and not inherited, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories where justice is served. Ice cold. Let me know in the comments. Would you have given them the key to the shack?